Okay, guys, we're all here. We're recording this. Does anybody have an issue with recording it? Anybody who it's not okay that we record it? Let us know now because it will be used publicly. It will be used publicly. And I am also checking to make sure that I don't have anybody that's got problems getting in or anything real quick. Nope. Okay, nobody has said no. All right. So this today, just so you all know, there has been a task force that has been put together, and they're gathering materials for what we have talked about in the last two sessions, which was using tech and other things and advancing alternative peer group programs into the public mind so that the public assimilates APG as the way to go. And then each one of our programs, of course, would be representing that opportunity in the areas we serve. There's a task force that God has graced us with some people with deep experience in marketing and carrying messages and stuff, which is really interesting. The timing is incredible. And again, I shouldn't be surprised because these things happen over and over and over again. No matter what you think is causing the organizational life as it is, you know, for me, it's that God thing and it's happening. Anyhow, so we've been graced with these folks and some other people who also have some experience. So there is a task force that's starting to put together, you know, strategies, tactics, using different logistics, et cetera, et cetera. So today, though, I thought we'd break away into something different. I have a little something here to show you, and I thought we would do it on. I know this is kind of rough. It's not real high-techy. Is that backwards? Can y'all see that?
That's good.
We can see it, but is that your handwriting? That must be your handwriting.
The other stuff is my handwriting. But look at this part right here. All right. So I thought we would spend some time today on working with parents who said yes. Okay. So I'm going to stop talking for a second and let some people talk to me and tell me what your experience is when I say, and I hope that I'm not dating myself again. When I, you know, you remember the old Just Say No campaign, that this concept of parents who said yes is a play off of that old campaign. In other words, parents who are using. What are y'all experiencing out there? How many of the parents, how many of the family members are using? And I'm not just talking about parents, I'm talking about siblings, grandparents, etc.
It's a really good question. And I think it's sometimes hard to know. I have my concerns about some people, but it's kind of hard to know.
Other people's experiences?
Yeah, I mean, I think we hear from the teens, you know, about parent use. That's how we find out about it. It's not like they're telling us. And you hear rumors and or you see on their parents' Facebook page, and you start to kind of put pieces together. And I think that's what we're kind of doing at Bridges is we're starting to put those pieces together of, oh, this is what's happening in the home. So like Robin was saying, we sure don't know for sure, but have suspicions about several of the parents of what's going on there. And it's always shocking to me because we didn't get these parents in the beginning of their kids' sobriety journey, that the parents will still have alcohol and I imagine marijuana in the homes, despite the fact they have kids who are in recovery. So it's something we'll be struggling up against to try to work with them on. You know, feels a little late in the game because some of these kids are 1 or 2 years sober and, you know, their parents think they've got it handled. And why shouldn't they have their own substances in the house?
Right. Other anecdotes or general feels for the population you're working with? Anything out of New Hampshire? I'd love to hear something out of there. Anna, John.
I'll throw a number out there.
Okay.
Okay. And working with, because Bill, who's not here today, works with families, but I did spend 4 years working with families at the park. We've mentioned that facility before, working with the family groups for 4 years. And your question comes down to education, because you can see the light coming on, that they still have their wine. That's okay with a meal. Okay. And then part of the education of what they would say, well, all alcohol has to be out of the home. Now, we didn't get into marijuana or anything else, that was a given. And they would give a list out of what that could include. And it was like, that's when you heard the feedback. Okay. The feedback is, okay, depending on the individual, you may need to have rubbing alcohol. You may need to have, we didn't say go to clean out the bar. We didn't even do that. Well, we can put a key in that and lock it, right? But no, extracts, vanilla, those kind of things. And they had a whole list that somewhere on there that would pretty much ferret out any concerns, if you will, or get someone to voice something. And based on that, the number, I would say, that just acknowledged, didn't work on, just acknowledged in that group was well over 50%. So that's the ones that waited for someone else to answer because they didn't want to. So I would think that number is closer to what the consumption rates for just from marketing for alcohol sales and things like that, especially if you throw in, and depending on where you put that guideline, the holiday special events, not everyday drinkers, that number would probably approach 80%. National marketing guidelines would say that people that drink on a regular basis would be well over the 50 to 60% range. And those are wags, way out there guesses.
All right. Other ideas, other thoughts. By the way, everybody write down, you just said something, okay? If you can, write it down, type it up, whatever, or somebody could make notes and share it with us later. He was talking about the organization he mentioned. The park has been around decades, all right, working with substance use. And they actually do a really good job in the most part. I refer to them very commonly. With adolescents, they're real plugged into alternative peer group programs. They have the APGs come in and do presentations, and they do presentations with the families, and so that there's a pretty smooth. They even have in their school, it goes straight in. It is part of Archway Academy thing. Or last time I was deeply involved in talking with them. So this is an organization that is of our heart and has gone way down this road over literally decades. One of the things, so they are going to develop some things and we should take advantage. One of the things he just talked about is they actually do some education activities. So that should be one of the things that goes to if you're not pointedly doing some education activities with the family, you should. Okay. I don't know if you can imagine, well, anecdotally, I just came off of a session with a 26-year-old, 27-year-old, and his entire family is partying. They're paying for his treatment. The entire family parties regularly. He is worried about there's a thing coming up, and some of his siblings have a house in Austin, and they all show up there, including the parents. And the marijuana and the liquor just flows like crazy. Not to mention, several of them are on different medications, pharmaceuticals. Okay, and they're all applauding his sobriety. And this is very common. very, very common. Y'all, I do want to tell you again, the little I can bring to this room is history. And I can tell you things are very, very, very different dealing with families now than it was in the 70s and even the 80s. This is a progressive thing on a cultural basis that is moving forward, and that is not good. Why is it not good? What are the reasons? And I'm going back to this education activities. If you're going to do an education activity, what are you going to educate them about? You know, what are you going to say to them? Something that Tim brought up was, well, I have my wine with my meals. So what's wrong with that? You know, is there anything wrong with that? How do we address that? How do you talk to a parent who says yes, not only said yes, but is saying yes, maybe has been saying yes for a very long time? Had I not gotten arrested, guys, I could have easily ended up a principal, you know, or somewhere in the educational field, somehow kept on conning, doing controlled shifting from one drug to another. I might have, you know, God knows how insane I could have gotten ultimately. So I could have had a kid. I could have shown up ready for help, you know, looking for help for my crazy kid, when I am in fact, you know, the one who is also deeply involved in the disease. What's the approach? You know, we know education, right? What do we educate about? Where do we begin? Where do you begin with your people that you're working with? Yeah, you're muted. Let me take you off here. There you go. You're muted, Tim.
Gotcha. There we go. Yeah, I give them a shocker, some things. You know, I go back to when I started really expanding from recovery, which is um, simply bearing down, not drinking versus trying to find serenity. Okay. That was a big, took me 25 years to take that big step, to just not drink and hate everyone, to actually start finding peace with myself. So when you go back, one of the things that I fought against is just a real base element that's not going to change. A shocker that alcoholism is a disease. Just that statement alone will start a conversation, a long conversation that will last, that will organically grow. So before you hit them with something like that, a conversation piece, a discussion piece. And the discussion piece, I should have it right here. It's a list of, okay, when we're having these conversations and you're supporting your child or your spouse, and okay, did you know there's a thing out there called a list of the do's and don'ts? What? Okay, you know, that's eye-opening. You mean there's some things that, okay, let me give you some guidelines. And here's a list of some of the things you do, and it's like 10 things. And here's a list of the things you don't do. And that is enough to get most conversations really started. And there's several, okay, that fits into the routine when we do that. But those two, I worked for a year and a half just to gain understanding of some very, very simple, principled tools that are conversation pieces. The do's and don'ts is phenomenal for that, because it's, man, I wish I put my hands on it. I know I've got it here somewhere. And just having that conversation from a non-aggressive position. Okay, you've got it in writing now. When you want to talk to with your son, if you follow these rules, you're going to be part of your son's recovery. That's a big carrot. And I'll read through it real quick so you can get an idea, if that's okay. Okay, the do's and don'ts. Do learn, this is your part as a parent or a spouse. Do learn the facts about addiction. Do talk to someone who understands addiction. Do go to Al-Anon, AA, NA, or 12-step program. Do develop an attitude to match the facts. Do take personal inventory of yourself. Do maintain a healthy emotional atmosphere in your home. Do encourage new interest in activities. Do pass the knowledge of addiction on to others, and do seek spiritual help. Do get a sponsor, because you're only going to see me once a week. So if you follow those do's, you're going to really be a huge support and part of the recovery. But don't preach or lecture, although you're very good at it. Don't argue with an addict and
John.
addiction. And don't have a holier than thou attitude. Don't use the "if you love me" appeal. Don't make threats you can't carry
Yes.
out. Don't resent the method of recovery. Don't expect immediate contented sobriety.
What kind of
And
test?
don't be discouraged by the mistakes that you make. And so if you just go through that list and start picking it apart, believe me, you're going to find a conversation piece and a hot button or two.
Yes, I am.
And so that's a real conversation starter. And if you really want to engage, and that's
for
what
COVID?
as a facilitator that I was doing, is engaging with the
Oh,
parent
okay.
and meeting them wherever they were, whatever their button was, whatever their question was. And
Really?
that's why you have the "don't be discouraged," because if I'm giving you this list and saying don't do this, and they go down the list and say, well, I have to preach an extra, and this morning, "if you love me," and you're telling me that as a parent I'm wrong, and I'm saying this is what's helpful, and how do
All right,
you
let
say
me, is it
anything that's
possible for me
helpful
to call you back?
for the client to progress in recovery. And you start working on developing those core skills. And it's funny, a year later, you have the same person, and and you can just measure that lesson over and over, how they've developed and how they participate and how they rely on the changes that those rules help them. And they never had anything in writing. And it's a bold statement to hand them something and say, this is what you do and this is what you don't. Now let's talk about it, or make up your own better ones. And that's to get them engaged. Okay, just to start down that path, to get them engaged, and then you can work into at my house, at my house, or in my situation, and you're speaking the same language.
Let me ask you this, you guys, so you'll hear this over and over and over again. If you'll notice in the field, you'll hear the term addiction, you'll hear the term alcoholism, you'll hear the term disease, you'll hear the term, and then the new term that gets thrown around right now is substance use disorder. Okay. Notice it is not substance abuse disorder. It is substance use disorder. That specific, there were large discussions about that term before they lit on substance use, and the issue about abuse versus use was in the discussions. One of the most powerful things to get across to family, and you can do it without calling them out, is the facts about neurological and hence psychological reality of substance use. Okay? Notice I did not say substance abuse. I said substance use. The very first step in getting information to a family member is very similar to getting information to the person who is the presenting issue. It's very, I cannot tell you how important it is to get the bottom lines across to them. And if you're not fluent with them, we need to do some things to help that. All right. And there are things you can do where you say it back and forth to each other. You go over stuff. The guy that I do the podcast with several times. I've had to go over, and he still will say substance abuse, but because of the nature of our relationship and everything, we've had real discussions about this. He gets it. He's just in the habit of saying substance abuse. Now, parents who said yes are in the habit of thinking certain things about substance use. Certain substances are okay. Wine with my meal. Certain or my prescription. Certain substances are not okay. Heroin, you know, depends on, usually if you'll notice, the substances that are okay are the ones I'm using. The substances that are not okay are the ones that my loved one is using. It's causing them to be crazy. Even though I'm on my 5th marriage, I can't, you know, I keep picking people who use with me. We keep going down more and more dysfunctional psychology, and it's affecting the relation, you know, inability to keep relationships, etc. Not to get too far down in that rabbit hole. Let me focus on, if you can't, this is going to be very pointed, and I don't do this very often, but I am going to do this one. If you can't describe what these substances, that includes alcohol, marijuana, and prescription medications that affect the neurotransmitter system. If you can't say what I just said, and you can't describe what are the aspects in breaking that neurotransmitter regulation system, what are dendrites, what do substances do, what does that do to the development of the human being? If you can't do that, it's time for a brush up. That's one of the things, if you want to be effective at helping families who said yes, family members who said yes, you really need to get up to speed on that, because here's why. The realities of this disease cut off the alibi. That's why they said substance use instead of abuse. Abuse left the door open for a bunch of alibis that are not real. The word use focuses on these substances go after the neurotransmitter regulation system in the brain. They do. I don't care if it's Adderall or Xanax or alcohol and wine or alcohol and whiskey or marijuana through a jewel or a marijuana tab or a gummy. These substances go after the neurotransmitter regulations in the brain. The younger the brain, the more apt it is to break. Once it's broken, you got problems. Why? Because how it affects the development of psychology. So being able to explain that is very, very important in what to do with families who said yes. Okay?
John, may I ask a question?
Yes.
So I'm thinking about the neurotransmitter issue and just the neurology piece, and I'm thinking about the fact that many people use substances to self-medicate for an underlying anxiety, depression, etc. We know that antidepressants definitely change the neurological structure of the brain, but many would argue in a helpful way. So can you talk me through that piece?
Yes. This is another very common, it is born from misunderstanding of the neurology psychology connection. Okay. What you will find, talking about, you know, the alibis, a lot of the folks who will take those medications, all right, deal with those unpleasant feelings. Anxiety is an unpleasant feeling. Depression is actually kind of a snowball of anxiety and fear and sadness and guilt. You know, depression is an interesting word. What we'll find oftentimes is the people who are taking these medications oftentimes in this group we're talking about will not be taking it according to what the medications say they're supposed to be done. They will take the medication and they will drink and they will smoke dope on it. Okay? Despite the fact that it says over and over and over again, don't do anything else. All right? Now, so the question is, what are we really doing? Because what those bad feelings, depression, anxiety, fear, shame, guilt, those, you know, these feelings that we've given these terms, they're coming out of a part of the brain that is affected by these substances. Is there a place for using prescription medications to help with that? Yes. Is it possible for the prescription medications to complicate and become the problem? Yes. That's why proper use of these medications requires levels of monitoring much, much higher than what we provide in this culture. So what is supposed to be a help has actually become part of the problem. One of the big things that everybody goes through is which comes first, the bad feelings or the dope? Everybody goes through that game, all right? Well, I can answer that for you. Bad feelings come first. Guess what? Not all bad feelings are bad things. If I get up, let me give you an example. If I got up this morning and I decided I don't want to do that stupid class, that APG class, I'm going to blow it off and I'm going to lie about it because I'm not feeling very good. In a normal human brain that has grown in a normal process, I should have some feelings of guilt and shame for lying to you guys. All right? You know what? I can make those bad feelings go away like that. I just go to my prescription. Okay? I take my whatever it is, you know, I don't know, depending on what I'm on, and the bad feeling goes away. Bad feeling, had it not gone away, next week would have prompted me maybe to do some honorable things, like go ahead and do the class and tell you guys, hey, actually, I was all messed up. I'm really sorry. Be honest. Then we have this thing called character, and it grows from that kind of thing. If I took mad and then I take it next week, I don't have, you know, I'm not motivated by any kind of bad feelings to do an honorable thing to help the bad feelings go away. So what's happening to the development of my psychology?
It's being
This is
stunted.
how aberrant psychology developed. Medications can, I'm not saying they do, I'm saying they can play a part. One of the things that's very important to find out is, well, let's see, you've got anxiety and depression problems. Do you smoke dope? When did you start? Do you drink? When did you start? Did you mix your, you know, did you get Adderall when you were 8 years old? Starting to develop an alternative, you know, a neurotransmitter system. This is a really complicated issue. The problem of going to bad feelings need something to make them go away. Well, they do. The problem is when it's medical instead of maybe behavioral or some of the things that don't cause continued change in the neurotransmitter system. Unfortunately, we don't have the accountability systems to look at that. We don't do that. And it just opens the door to a big mess. And that's unfortunately what we have. I love medications. I hate the way our culture uses them because it is not responsible. It is actually malpractice, frankly. In my opinion, that's my opinion. Does that help a little bit?
Yes, thank you.
Did I say, guys, that was a pretty complicated question and a complicated answer. If I said something that rubbed somebody wrong or upset somebody, or I said something that was wrong, please don't hesitate to step forward and say, I don't know, what about this? Because that's how we work these things out. I might be wrong, you know?
I think what I hear you saying, John, is that there is a difference between a medical need for medical interventions versus, where do you draw the line? What's behavioral? What's actual physiology? And you're playing with fire when you're throwing meds at things without really knowing what's going on. And
Again, in this issue, we don't do the same things that we do with the rest of the health issue. If I pull a muscle, my doctor, if I go to my doctor and say, I pulled a muscle, I'm having a lot of pain right here, he might give me some some kind of medication for it. What is that? Steroids. He might give me some steroids to help something. All right. He's not going to give me steroids forever. And if I go back, he's going to want to know, is it still hurting? Is it not hurting? Well, let's do this. Let's do that. Let's do all these things to make sure before I give you more steroids. That's not what we do in mental health. We don't operate that way. I woke up, I'm feeling anxious. I go see my MD, not even a psychologist or a psychiatrist. My medical, just my general practitioner. I'm having some trouble sleeping. Here's a Xanax prescription.
Can I share something? It might be kind of tangent, but as far as the psych meds, so I've been working with a naturopath, and she gave me a gene test to see how different drugs interacted with my genes. And it literally showed why meth was my drug of choice, because of a gene adaptation that makes it hit my brain harder and faster than the general population, and showed why opiates don't do anything for me. I mean, those were the pieces of information I gleaned from it, but she was able to see which SSRIs or whatever, all of those. It's
right.
Not just this trial and error.
Right.
There is science.
And they have it. We have it. We just don't use it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like the thing, disease we work with, substance use disorder. Science says 18 months to 4 years to stabilize. The science says case manage it. The science says do continuity of care through all of it. How much is that done? It's not. Why?
Meds are always a slippery slope in situations like this. The conversation can, always navigate to one direction or another. I like what you had to say, John. I really, and to go back, because, about what you said about the meds is that, I agree with what Michelle heard you say. And I would also like to put on top of that what I hear you saying is let's find out what's at the base of everything. Get clean, get off drugs. And then if you still have depression, if you still have this, then you take it as prescribed. You don't take your antidepressant and then, kick back a couple drinks to, because that's not proper use. So that's what I think I hear you saying.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
And then, but to kick back on what you're saying, when you bring in a parent, I've been thinking about this whole session. It was when the first time I was in treatment, I believe they told my parents, you can't have any alcohol in the house. I mean, my parents are actually normies when it comes to alcohol. They're total normies. There's no, the genes skipped them because both of their dads were alcoholics. So, for whatever reason, it skipped them. But I don't see any reason, I don't know if it's our responsibility to point out that, hey, you might have a substance use disorder or a substance abuse problem. I believe that, when it comes to having, doing an intake with parents without the teen there, of saying, we're not here to, I don't know how you put it, but say, look, here's a list of stuff that if you have alcohol in the house, you should probably get it out. If you have weed in the house, you need to get it out. If you have prescriptions that you're not using or prescriptions that, you don't really need, you should get them out of the house. and just kind of leave it at that and just have a straightforward conversation and saying, because if you don't, the likelihood of your kid finding that, even if you have it locked up, I guarantee you they're going to figure out how to open it because they're addicts.
Yeah.
You know, and then let them find out whether or not they have a substance use disorder by, like, as Robin's story, she came after her, you know, after her kids were in the APG, Robin went, oh shit, I got a problem, you know, let them come to their
Yeah.
own conclusion. But I think a straightforward conversation of like, get that shit out of there, you know, that you're not helping your kid and you're putting forth all this money, you know, why?
One of the other things, and a thing that we have used historically in that conversation, what I am saying is, in those initial conversations, what we call a strategy appointment, go ahead and present the facts. You know, there are some facts that are really hot that later will maybe pay off. You know how it is. Y'all know how it is. We're always sowing seeds that later on grow into an awareness and a reality that creates change. That's typically what we do. Well, some of the seeds have to do with being very good at describing this disease and the effects of these substances and how it affects this developing psychology. That's one seed. Second seed is the one you're talking about, what to have in the house. And one of the things that we will use periodically, or have historically, is just to say, look, if your young person was diabetic and had the kind of diabetes that craves chocolate cake, how many chocolate cakes would you leave sitting around the house? You know, very simply. And listen, by the way, if the answer is they need to deal with it, you might need to ask yourself how much you like chocolate cake.
That's right.
I don't know, you know, that kind of thing. Now, a lot of times you can tell when somebody has this disease by what they're willing to give up to keep using, what kind of games they're willing to play in their head. If I'm willing to, you know, if I'm willing to subject my child to a lot of, you know, and opportunity for justification and those kind of things in order to continue to use, I need to maybe look at how important using is to me. Those things, raising those questions without accusing anybody, doing it in a general sense, maybe in the climbers groups, those kind of things. A climbers group is an orientation group, an early issues group that you'll do with family members. Bringing those things up is a good idea, typically. And not only is it a good idea, guys, given this culture, it's a really, really good idea. Really, really good. Other thoughts? Anybody got something they want to say? Listen, a second ago, I apologize. A second ago, I had to switch off and take a phone call. Y'all might have heard me. We're trying to get my wife vaccinated, and a phone call came through from the Texas Health Department, and I thought that's what it was. And I apologize.
I have a couple things to say, John. I mean, because this really hits home with me on many levels. But first of all, Charlie brought up a really good point about the genetic testing. That's something that Crystal Collier talks about in her famous video that I tell everybody about. There's a lot of education in that video, and you know, that's really helpful to share with families. But I think it's $199. You can get the genetic test, and it's pretty extensive. I have never done it because I haven't felt the need to for myself, but for some families that's helpful, especially if they have younger kids, that they want to know what to look for or what to how to prevent it from happening.
Common misunderstanding. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
A common misunderstanding about the genetics. Be very careful with this. Talking. Everybody thinks there's like a drunk gene or not a drunk. It's not. It's exactly what Charlie was talking about. There's a susceptibility to certain substances. That's one of the genetic issues. The other genetic issue is how easy it is to break the neurotransmitter regulations. How one of the things that affects it is age of the brain. There are other things also. There's things in the environment that will affect it. When we talk about trauma and those kind of things, that will affect it. It is one thing for me to smoke dope living in California with my star family, and I'm 21 years old. It's a whole different deal if I'm running around in the jungles of Vietnam being terrified and getting shot at regularly. The strain on the neurology is very different in those two situations. That means the neurology is more apt to break faster when you're going through the trauma of that wartime scenario than if you're sitting around smoking dope, with your star parent and stuff. I'm drawing off of real cases, by the way, here. So be careful with that, because you do not have to have the gene to have the disease.
Right.
These substances will break the brain of virtually anybody. It's just a matter of how much will it take to break the brain. Okay. And in some cases it takes a lot of it. In some cases it takes a little, and that'll change according to a lot of other factors. Genetics is a resistant element, to generalize it. Okay, it is not an on-off switch. You either got it or you don't. But when you're explaining, make sure you kind of go over that, because a lot of people really misunderstand the genetic elements in this.
May I ask a question? First of all, I can't tell who's speaking because I'm on the phone, but thank you to whoever just brought up Crystal Collier's name. I found her website, but I'm curious if you would mind sharing which video I think you were alluding to. Was it a video?
Yes, it's on YouTube. Just look up the science of high risk behavior, and it's the Hope and Healing Center. So I think that she's presented it a few times, but look up the one with she co-hosted it with Scott Basinger, and it's about an hour long. It's amazing. And maybe I can get you the link, John, and you can share it. I've seen her present it in person 3 times, and every time I learned something new. I wish the videos were better. Like, it's just powerful. I love her.
Hannah, can you, if we get that, if she shares that link, could you get it posted to the Dropbox that we've used for some of these materials? Or help
I
figure that
can
out?
send
I'm
it to
horrible.
Heidi and ask her to do that.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
I found it, but I won't post it anywhere.
All right. Carly, did you have
Did you
your
say
hand
you
up?
found it, Larissa?
I did. It's on the Hope and Healing Center YouTube channel, and it says Dr. Scott Basinger and Crystal Collier. It's about an hour long.
Yep, that's the one.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
That was Robin, by the way.
So I know that this is a small group today, but many people will be watching this in the future. And other APGs may not have a solid family program yet, but this is proof of why that needs to happen. You cannot have an effective APG without the family component. You just can't.
No.
From my perspective as a family member, and I think it was done right with me. When we entered, my strategy appointment was 4 hours long. They gave me all kinds of information. It can't stop there. That's why we have the climbers group here at Bridges. We're calling it pillars. I love that. And that was Charlie's idea. And so we just started our pillars group, and I know what's going to happen. We have already, I can tell that there's some resistance from parents. This is a waste of time. I don't need to be here, especially from people who may have long-term sobriety, because that happens too. And that happened in the group I was in. It took me over a year to finally start getting honest with myself. And it didn't come from someone saying, sign this contract that you won't have alcohol in your home. I wouldn't have been there. I think I would have not been at the APG if someone made me do that. So I know some other programs do that. I don't think they enforce it, but they
Right.
have them sign it. I really think that this is a 1.5 to 4-year program for a reason for the parents, really. It's for them to start changing and for them to get honest with themselves. And it's about building relationships and being willing to get messy with them. And, you know, I have to practice my Al-Anon skills with the parents and not take things personally. You know, when I know that what I'm telling them has helped me, hopefully I help some of them too. But I had to learn all the neurology. That's the next thing we're going through. I have quite a few resources to share with them. And I know that it might take them seeing this multiple times throughout the years to finally say, aha, I get it. That's how the brain works. That's why I wake up shaky, or, you know, that's what happened with me. I started putting the pieces together slowly and while watching my kids get serious about their recovery, which was pretty amazing. So it just takes time, but confronting the alibis is important. Just do it gently, because otherwise you may scare people away. And yeah, that's really what getting off my soapbox now. This is a topic that's dear to my heart.
You can get on it anytime. Other ideas, other things that are people. Charlie, go ahead.
It sounds like, so, and for me, like sometimes facts speak to me, but more often it's feelings. Like I think we're going to reach some people with the neurology facts and some people with like feelings, like James was saying. And like my experience when I was a teenager, watching my mom pour all of her booze down the drain, that was like, damn, she's picking me. And like, you know, or like if my mom were to hang out with these teens are giving up their best friend. And then if their parents are still hanging out with their best friend, but they can't, like that sense of betrayal. Yeah, so facts and feelings, I think both need to be present.
I just had a vision of you telling that story in a parent meeting.
For sure.
And I had a vision of hearts breaking and some parents looking at themselves, really, maybe for the first time. Not everybody. Again, going back to the metaphor of filling the glass with water. You put water in, you know, the part that goes in last gets all the credit. If it hadn't been for those little things that got put in there along the way, you'd never get to that full point. Some of the people in that meeting, if you did that, Charlie, you know, they would have an awakening. Some would not, but some, a year down the road, might hit something that it all rubber banded, and suddenly they remembered that. So that is an activity that you can do. Having a young person come in, or having a person come in and share. We do something also called an SO, significant others meeting. And those things seem to sometimes will kick off a reality in a parent who said yes. An SO is when somebody has put together enough recovery, and it can have, if they're in a clinical element, it can happen much faster than if they're just going to meetings and stuff. But whenever it happens, when certain things come together, we will have people who are involved in the group meetings or the IOP, depending on the scenario, gather with a person. When they're ready, the counselor will work with that person on getting ready for it and addressing the things they need to address. Family will be in the meeting and they will talk to them and tell them, I'm sorry about this, I understand this, I'm making a committal to that, and always there's room for the family to be able to talk back. There's always work with the family also prior to that. You don't just throw them into it, because you have to give them some guidelines. But it also will have sometimes a punch getting across to that person who's developed the disease. The problem with this stupid disease is, by nature, you don't think you have it. and create all of these proofs that you don't, and you can handle it. And it's just as true for a 40-year-old mom as it is for a 14-year-old. In fact, maybe more so. They've had longer to build it up, get it more entrenched, all of that kind of stuff. So tearing it down, it's like an assault, long term. It's like a siege on the disease. That's why we do these meetings. It's kind of, we're besieging these folks, that kind of thing. So long term, you're hoping to wear things down as well as any kind of attack we might make. So if we were talking about, when it was used early on, we were talking about, okay, guidelines. What is okay? And that's something you can do with a family too. Go help them figure out. Because what'll happen is if you get really fluent, not affluent, if you get fluent at explaining and applying the realities of the disease, the neurological and hence the psychological. If you get really good at that, and then you start working with them on something, maybe house rules, why these house rules, etc. That kind of thing drives questions of, well, what is it okay for me to do? Well, isn't it okay for me to have wine? Well, maybe, I don't know. Let's look at this in the light of these realities of this disease. Very similar to if I'm a diabetic, is it okay for me to have a brownie? If I'm not a diabetic, is it okay for me to have a brownie? Well, how many brownies? What happens if you have too many brownies? How much do you like brownies? All sorts of things, all sorts of stuff like that. But going with okay guidelines and house rules, creating house rules and all that kind of thing is a very, very interesting process. What you get down to is time. How much time can we put into thinking about this disease and truth, the realities of the disease, telling the truth. What we're up against is a multi-trillion-dollar industry that is lying like a dog. Lying, yeah. Baby. I mean, just flat lies. And I mean a lot of it. These poor people that are coming to us day after day after day after day by the most powerful media machine in the history of the earth, they're being told that the path to success, sex, and sophistication is that glass of wine, that medication that keeps me from having any bad feelings, that new marijuana that'll cure everything. And what it won't cure, well, the mushrooms will. They're being told this over and over and have been being told it for decades. So don't get too hard on yourself, but don't let it scare you off either. Because the difference in what they're being told and what you're telling them is something we call truth. And honor is a not very often used term, but it comes from the root word honesty, which is truth. So remember that you're acting with honor and continuing to carry this message and looking for new ways. If y'all hit on new ways, new things that seem to really, really get home, share it. When I told Charlie, I said, I'm not kidding. What you just said, that was really powerful. You ought to write it down. Mm-hmm. You ought to write down what you just said and share it with folks. It's something you don't have to necessarily say that to a parent for it to strike home. They might read it in the next parent meeting. You might walk in and say, guys, you just hit me. And I want to share something with you. I was in that weird training thing of that Gates dude. And he said I should share. So, okay, here it is. That kind of stuff. Of course, check it out with your leadership and everything. But let's do what you can on this. Actually, there are lots and lots of activities out there. I'll take a picture of this and try and include it with, you guys, because I'm not, and you'll have to forget about the notes that are on it. and I'll try and get that out to you. These are not only parents who said yes to using, but also parents who said yes to treatment, of their young person or their loved one. So, kind of mix it around. Other questions, last minute, anything? Oh, it's 12:07. I keep looking at my watch. My watch is slow. I'm so sorry, you guys. I will talk to you later.
Great stuff.
Love you
Great
guys.
stuff.
Bye-bye.
Good talk to you forever, John. Thank you.